have great influence over the laws that are made in Brussels. What we haven't talked about at all in this referendum is what kind of laws are being made. Now, we have our own common law system, as Jacob said, from Magna Carta onwards. It's evolved, but it's been based around some very simple but effective principles that protect the individual against the state. The presumption of innocence before guilt. Habeas corpus. They can't bang you up and throw away the key without first producing a charge. And of course our right to trial by jury. And all of these things have been absolutely fundamental. Now look, I've said before, I'm not anti-European. There's an awful lot we can learn from Europe. Lifestyle, food, there are many things we can learn from Europe. But one thing we don't need to learn from Europe is about judicial systems. I am utterly convinced that our common law system, with its protections, is infinitely superior to the form of law that comes across most of the European continent, which of course is inquisitorial and places enormous power in the hands of a prosecutor who says you are guilty. And you as the individual then effectively have to reverse that burden of proof and show somehow that you're innocent. And I have to say that I have opposed the European arrest warrant at every single stage since it first hove into view 15 years ago. I voted against it at every stage in the European Parliament. Interestingly, a young member of Parliament from Whitney in 2002 made a very impassioned speech on the subject of the arrest warrant, and David Cameron said in that first debate that he was very, very keen for this to be struck down. How things have changed. It was a Liberal Democrat, Graham Watson, MEP, now Sir Graham, who pushed through this profoundly illiberal law. I'm afraid this warrant removes the presumption of innocence before guilt, and it leaves our nationals vulnerable to being extradited without the production of any prima facie evidence at all. And then what it does is it throws out of the window habeas corpus, because any individual is then liable to be left rotting in a foreign prison without facing a proper charge. My view is that it's the first duty of government, it's the first duty of the British government to put the interests of its own people first, and therefore I believe the European arrest warrant, frankly, is an abomination. Deborah Dark's case we've heard today. Jacob talked about the heart-wrenching case of the Kings and their sick child. The one case that I've tried to champion over the years, and I did it again and again on Question Time and wherever I could, was the case of Andrew Symeou. Andrew Symeou was a young 18-year-old, finished his A-levels, they'd gone to a Greek island and were doing what young lads after their A-levels do. Something unfortunate happened in a nightclub, not that it had anything to do with Andrew at all. Some friends of his were taken in by the Greek police, subjected to brutality, both physical and mental, and forced to sign a confession. Interestingly, the point about translators was made earlier. There weren't any translators. The form they signed was in Greek, saying that it was Andrew Symeou that had pushed somebody off the stage who subsequently had fallen, hit their head, and died. A warrant was issued for Andrew Symeou to be extradited to Greece. Once a European arrest warrant is issued, and by the way, not necessarily by a judge, but by a prosecutor. And that's a very fundamental point, I think, here. Once that happens, there is nothing the UK courts, authorities or government can do to protect that individual. So Andrew was taken off to a Greek prison, and you can read in the Fair Trials Abroad handout the kind of appalling conditions that he was in. He was there for 10 months without facing charge. He was then bailed for a further year, and at the end of it, all charges were dropped. This is happening to too many people. Yet despite all of this, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, opted us back into the European arrest warrant when we had the chance last year to get out of it. Interestingly, this debate is not confined just to this country. In Denmark, there was a referendum in December where they have completely opposed Denmark taking part in what is known as the common area of freedom, security and justice within the EU. So the Danes have said, we don't want it, and certainly our position is, we don't want it. You know, we've had extradition with other countries for about 200 years. We already, as a nation, have 90 individual extradition treaties that we're signed up to. There are some that will tell us that the European arrest warrant makes us safer. Indeed, BSE, the Remain campaign, in their big leaflet push out around the nation, have been telling us that we're safer with the European arrest warrant. But frankly, we're far less safe being in the EU because our doors are open to foreign criminals and indeed even terrorists. So I don't buy that we're safer with the European arrest warrant. I actually would argue that our own citizens are subject to being extradited, possibly for offences that aren't even against the law in this nation, and that the whole thing is working very badly. And there's an irony to all of this, and it is that whilst innocent British people have suffered horribly under the European arrest warrant, because of the European Convention on Human Rights, we find ourselves as a nation often with an impossible job to extradite people, known murderers, rapists, even Abu Qatada. It took us 10 years to get rid of Abu Qatada because of the European Convention on Human Rights. So frankly, what has happened is EU membership has thrown our entire legal system up in the air. We're living in a very topsy-turvy world, and those of us that are campaigning for Brexit believe in liberty. We believe in that it's not perfect, but we believe the British judicial system, aided and abetted by sensible extradition treaties, is the right way forward. Thank you.